After the outbreak of the Russia-Ukraine war, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky issued a global call for foreign volunteers to join the Ukrainian army and fight against Russian forces. This appeal quickly gained traction in international media, with major news outlets covering the stories of volunteers heading to Ukraine. During the surge of reports in February and March, The Independent published an article titled, "Joining the Foreign Legion: Meet the veterans who heeded Ukraine's call to fight Russia." Another report from the same publication highlighted how social media platforms like Twitter and WhatsApp groups provided guidance on enlisting in the newly formed Foreign Legion. One notable story featured a former Canadian firefighter who sold his $11,000 motorcycle to fund his journey to Ukraine as a volunteer soldier. According to these reports, dozens of individuals gathered at the Ukrainian embassy in London, eager to enlist and expressing their willingness to risk their lives against Russian troops. The BBC quoted a Nigerian volunteer who declared, "Fighting in Ukraine is better than living here." Meanwhile, The Guardian shared the words of another volunteer, "My plan is not to have a plan." Time magazine also released a special feature titled, "Meet the Foreign Volunteers Who Risk Their Lives to Defend Ukraine and Europe." Social media played a crucial role in mobilizing these volunteers. A subreddit called Ukrainian Volunteers emerged on Reddit, filled with posts persuading people to enlist, alongside logistical details about crossing the border, acquiring equipment, and reaching their destinations. This media-driven push led to a significant response. President Zelensky later announced that over 16,000 volunteers had arrived in Ukraine from across the world. However, after these initial reports, the media largely went silent. What happened to these volunteers once they arrived? That question remained unanswered. The reality was far from the heroic narratives. "Don't come here. They won't let you leave. It's a trap. Stay home," warned an American volunteer in a video posted online moments before being killed by Russian forces. Thousands of volunteers, including individuals from the UK, USA, Canada, and Europe, entered Ukraine in what became the largest land war in Europe since World War II. Many soon realized they were unprepared for the grim reality awaiting them. The Ukrainian Volunteers subreddit became a platform for first-hand accounts from those who enlisted, sought weapons, and engaged in battle. Many of these self-proclaimed legionnaires lacked combat experience or firearms training. One distressed American volunteer posted a video stating, "We were promised weapons, but we're being sent to Kiev with nothing. Our base was bombed. The base next to us was bombed. Americans and dozens of British fighters were killed. They don't acknowledge our dead, they count them as their own. They're trying to send us into battle without guns, without gear, without armor plates. Those who manage to buy a gun are only given a 10-round magazine." The same volunteer claimed that Ukrainian forces under martial law threatened to shoot those who refused deployment. He recounted his desperate attempt to escape with two others, only to be stopped and forced back to Kiev. "People need to stop coming here. It's a trap, and they won't let you leave," he warned. Some volunteers were sent to military training camps before deployment, but these camps were often compromised due to social media exposure. Foreign fighters posted images of their locations on Reddit to prove their involvement, unknowingly making themselves targets. In one tragic case, a volunteer's post was followed by an airstrike on his camp within an hour. Survivors described the situation as chaotic, with disorganized forces and paramilitary groups, warning others to stay away. Why did so many inexperienced individuals willingly throw themselves into a war against one of the world's most powerful armies? One major factor was the influence of international media. Another was the widespread misinformation surrounding the war. which led many to believe that Ukraine was destined for victory. Sensationalized images of Ukrainian models and beauty queens posing with firearms created the illusion that anyone could pick up a weapon and fight. Additionally, fabricated narratives fueled unrealistic expectations. One widely circulated tale, even reported by mainstream media, was the legend of the Ghost of Kyiv, an unidentified Ukrainian pilot allegedly responsible for downing 10 Russian warplanes. Another was the Kyiv Reaper, a fighter supposedly responsible for killing over 100 Russian soldiers in a single day. These stories, combined with exaggerated claims of Ukrainian military success, gave foreign volunteers a false sense of security. Ultimately, many well-intentioned but ill-prepared individuals paid the price for believing these narratives, some with their lives, others with the trauma of a war they were not equipped to fight. Russia's military operation in Ukraine is not only a show of military power, but also a multi-layered strategy involving psychological warfare and propaganda. By encouraging foreign volunteers to fight in Ukraine, Russia may have aimed to manipulate international media narratives to its advantage. The influx of foreign volunteers has, in a way, played into Russia's hands, creating a psychological and military impact. The loss of Western volunteers, who came with high expectations only to face dire conditions, has become a tool for Russian propaganda. Each casualty contributes to the story Russia is telling the world, showing that Ukraine is struggling and that the support it receives is far from sufficient. As the situation in Ukraine escalates, Russia has been able to manipulate the narrative through its own extensive propaganda efforts. The tragic stories of foreign volunteers, many of whom were poorly equipped and inadequately prepared for the horrors of war, feed into the Russian narrative that Ukraine's defense is not as formidable as the West portrays it. The international media, while initially amplifying the heroic calls for foreign intervention, has not fully addressed the dark realities these volunteers face. This disconnect between expectation and reality plays right into Russia's hands, as it continues to emphasize the chaos and suffering that foreign fighters face in Ukraine. Looking beyond the immediate battlefield, Russia's military actions in Ukraine have long-term implications for international relations. The failure of foreign volunteers, many of whom believed in the myth of an easy victory or glorious sacrifice, could shift global public opinion. The more countries witness the casualties and disillusionment among these volunteers, the less likely they are to support Ukraine in the same way. This is especially true for those considering sending their own citizens into conflict zones. The international community now faces a dilemma. On one side, there is the ethical imperative to support Ukraine in its fight against an aggressive foreign power. On the other, there is the reality of the growing risks posed by involvement, both for soldiers and civilians. The idealized image of fighting for freedom and justice, propagated by both Ukrainian and Western media, is being replaced by a more complicated, harsh reality where the cost of intervention may prove to be far too high.